For this mock exercise, we're going to take a look at processing cost. And essentially, there's basically two methods to analyze processing cost. One is called the weighted average, and the other one's called the FIFO method. So we're going to take a look at the weighted average, and we're going to use the question called ASEA Clothing Inc. To illustrate the analysis of analyzing the processing costs using the weighted average method. So let's look at the question. So ASEA manufactures winter clothing, and it has a knitting department and a finishing department. This exercise focuses on the finishing department. So the data that's given to you is for the finishing department. Direct materials are added at the beginning of the process, and conversion cost. And what is conversion cost? It's direct labor and overhead are added evenly throughout the process. And they're using the weighted average method of processing cost, and the information for the June 2012 for the finishing department is as follows. So let's read the facts together. So the work in progress at the beginning of June had 75 units. And clearly it hasn't been completed because it's in work in progress. And we're told that of that 75, the total cost that's been accumulated in that work in progress is $75,000. And you got 0 direct materials and conversion cost. Now, the degree of completion of the beginning is we've got all the materials already in there, but 60% of the conversion cost has only been incurred. So we still need an extra 40% to complete that work in progress into finished goods. Now, we're told that we transferred into work in progress 135 units. And we transferred out of work in progress and completed 150 units. And how many is left? We have 60 units that's sitting in work in progress at the end of the year. And of that 60, 75% is still, we've incurred 75% conversion cost and 0% of direct materials. And these are the total cost added for June. Now, we're asked to calculate first the equivalent units. Then we're asked to summarize the cost to account for and calculate the cost per equivalent units for transferred in direct materials and conversion cost using the weighted average method. And then we're going to take the unit cost and we're going to try to determine how much to cost out for units have been completed and transferred out and units that's sitting in work in progress. So that's the requirement for this question. So let's do this question together. So the first step, whenever we're doing a joint cost or joint processing cost, is first step is we need to analyze the number of physical units, the flow of physical units. So we're going to start with work in progress beginning. The number of units we're going to analyze. That's the first step. So let's call that step 1. So we know there were 75 units sitting in beginning inventory. How many units were transferred in June? So how many were added in June? We're told there was 135. So how many units do we need to account for? We need to account for 210 units. Now, of the 210, we're told that how many were completed. So completed is 150. That means that we have work in progress ending, the difference between the two, which is 60. So we know that these two has to equal to the accounted for values. So these two has to equal. So all we're trying to do is we're saying this is the beginning, this is how many units were actually transferred in, started. So altogether we need to account for what happened, 210 number of units. 150 of that was completed. That means that 60 must be still in work in progress. Now, step 2, we need to calculate equivalent units. So this is step 2. And when we're calculating equivalent units, we want to be able to analyze the transferred in cost, direct materials, and conversion. So the 150 that we know is completed, certainly that's the equivalent units for transferred in, direct materials, and conversion. Now, the work in progress of 60, we're told that the degree of completion, the transferred in cost is 100, so we know that's 60. So all of that were transferred in. And we're told the direct materials is 0%. So we know that the equivalent units is 0. And it's 75% of 60 is going to be 45 units. So let me just write this down. So 60, I'll write it down in black. So this is 60 times 100%. And this is 60 times 0%, and this is 60 times 75%. Just to show you how I got these numbers. So the total equivalent units for transferred in is 210, 150, and 195. Okay? Now that's the step 2. Now we're going to do step 3, 4, and 5. There's actually 5 steps to the process. So we're going to use, I'll try to use the same chart here. So step 3 is this step. So what was the work in progress beginning in terms of dollar amount? So transferred in was 75. Direct materials is 0. And conversion cost is 30. Okay, that's what we're told. That's what we were given. Now, how much was total cost added in June? It was 142, 37.5, and 78. So these are cost analysis, right? So we know it's 142,500. This one is 37,500. and this is 78,000. These are given to us. So the total cost to account for is the sum of these two. So this is 217,500. This is 37,500. And this is 108. Now step 4 says we need to calculate the cost per equivalent unit. How do we do that? Well, we know the equivalent unit, okay, is in step 2. These are the equivalent units. Let me highlight that too as well. So we're going to take the equivalent units divided by the cost to account for. The cost per equivalent unit is 1035.71. So in step 4, so let me recap. Step 1 requires us to analyze the flow, what's going on with the actual flow of goods. We started with 75, we added 135. Let me just fix that. And then we know that 150 was completed, then we know that 60 is still in work in progress. Step 2 says we need to convert these, step 1, into equivalent units. And the equivalent units is we know that the completed, all of that, 150, are equivalent units because they're all completed. But for work in progress, we're told that certain percentage of the effort has already been completed, degree of completion. So that was given to us in the question. So that gives us equivalent units. Step 3 says, what was the total cost we need to account for? And that's what these are. Step 4 says, let's calculate the cost per unit. Now, step 5 is we're going to assign the cost. We're going to now determine the total cost that's going to be in finished goods and work in progress. So how do we do that? So let's do step 5 on the next page. So step 5 is we need to assign the cost to finished goods and work in progress. So, how much was completed and transferred out? We know it was 150 units, right? And how much is sitting in work in progress? 60 units. Okay? And that just came from here. Now, what is the transferred in cost? So let me just put total, because we need a total here. Transferred direct material conversion cost. So let's look at the first one. The completed is 150. So we're going to take 150 times the average cost. Cost per equivalent unit is 1035.71 to give us okay, so let me just do that. Plus direct material is 150 times 250 plus 150 times 553.85. And this adds to 275,934. So that's the amount that we're going to transfer out to, let's say, finished goods if it hasn't been, if it wasn't sold in June. For the work in progress, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to take 60 units times 1035.71 plus 60 times 250 plus 60 times 553.85. That adds to 87,066. The total is 363. And by the way, that ties in with step 3. If you remember, what we did was with step 3, we added these 3, and this actually adds to 363. That's the total, and that ties in with step 3. So this is as per step 3. Now, if I add these two, I get 217,500. And this one, if I add these two, I get 37,500. And again, this one is 108. And this is exactly what we just calculated in step 3. Same numbers. Okay, so we basically answered this question. We were able to assign the cost to both, right, the completed goods, probably the finished goods, and work in progress. And that's the value I would record on my books. Thank you.